This is Apple's cheapest M4 Mac Mini, and it is being praised across the board right now as being the best value in the entire Mac lineup and possibly the best value in the entire computing industry. But there's something I noticed with a lot of reviews out there, and they are actually reviewing not this base model Mac Mini, they're reviewing the more powerful version of the M4 Pro Mac Mini. So I really wanted to take a look at that standard base spec, the one that retails for $600, to see, is this mini computer really powerful enough to power everyday tasks and beyond? Or should you skip this base model and get something with a little more power? So before we start talking about the performance of the M4 chip, especially compared to the older M2 Mac Mini and the more powerful M4 Pro Mac Mini, I just wanted to comment real quick on the design of this thing. Again, I really like this small design that Apple did with the Mac Mini. I got the old M2 version right here, and you can see it's a lot smaller, way more compact. It's almost like 1/4 the size of this Mac Mini. And it's really good. The thing I like about it the most, though, is, Apple made this smaller, but they actually added more ports to it. So on the M2 Mac Mini, you got 2 USB-C ports on the back, an HDMI port, 2 USB-A ports, a headphone jack, and an Ethernet jack. And basically, on this new Mac Mini, you're replacing those USB-A ports with 2 USB-C ports on the front. And then you get all of those same ports, but you're getting an additional USB-C Thunderbolt port on the back. So you're basically netting one more additional port. And I feel like that's a win from Apple, because usually when they make devices smaller, when they redesign, modern Mac devices, they'll remove some ports. And instead, you're kind of gaining an additional port with this model, even on the base model. So I really like that. Now, compared to the M4 Pro version of the Mac Mini, again, they have the same number of ports, but there is just one difference you need to know about, and that is that the Pro version actually has the newer Thunderbolt 5 spec. This can go all the way up to 120 gigabits per second in speed, while the normal M4 version gets Thunderbolt 4 ports. Now, these are still really fast. They get up to 40 gigabits per second. They can still drive like Apple Studio Display at 5K at 60 hertz. They can still power really fast external storage. It's still very, very fast. But, future-proof wise, if you're looking into the future, if you want like a very high resolution, high refresh rate display, it's probably gonna cost a lot of money, right? You might wanna look at Thunderbolt 5. Now, there's not much more to talk about the design, but I will be talking about one internal difference a little bit later in the video. So make sure you stay around for that, and make sure you get subscribed to the channel. We're still trying to get to 400,000 subscribers by the end of this year. So yeah, I really like this small design, but is the base spec good enough? I think that's the question a lot of people have. So what are you getting for $600? Well, you're getting the M4 chip with the full 10-core GPU, and you're also getting 16 gigabytes of memory as standard. This is a big change from Apple's base level M2 Mac Mini, which only started with 8 gigabytes of memory. So you're getting double the memory without having to spend any extra money. That's a really good thing from Apple. Now, one thing that they didn't increase on the M4 Mac Mini was the storage. It still just starts at 256 gigabytes of storage for that $600 price point. Despite having the same storage size as the old M2 Mac Mini, one big upgrade here is that Apple reverted their choice to only include one internal SSD in here and split that up to 2 128 gigabyte SSDs, which means the drive is faster on the M4 Mac Mini. You're getting around 2,500 to 3,000 read and write speeds. Now, I will note that the M4 Pro splits this task up to 4 different SSDs, I believe, and it totals up to 512 gigabytes of storage. And with that, you're getting a faster internal drive. You're getting around 4,000 to 5,000 read and write speeds. So that's already a clear win for the M4 version. You're getting a faster internal drive and double the memory. So already this is looking pretty good. But how does that M4 chip compare against the old M2 chip? Well, it's actually pretty favorable. So when you're looking at single core performance, the M4 actually gets around a 37% increase over the old M2 Mac Mini. And then the performance difference is just as drastic in multi-core performance. You're getting around a 36% increase in multi-core CPU performance. And for CPU performance, that's actually really good. The best direct comparison I can make to the M4 chip in terms of CPU performance would actually be against the older M3 Pro chip, not even the M3 chip or the M2 chip. So the fact that you're getting that level of CPU performance and even faster like single core performance, like don't forget, for $600, this is basically the fastest single core performance, not only in a Mac, but on any available chip right now. Like there's no Intel chip, there's no AMD chip that can beat a $600 Mac Mini in single core performance. And that is a pretty insane value when you look at this in terms of, just general CPU performance. But in terms of GPU performance, that's really still the weakness of these base level M4 chips. But you are getting still a 20% increase in GPU performance on the M4 over the M2. But overall, for $600, when you take all those scores into account, I think we could say that the M4 chip is a pretty good value when you compare it to some of Apple's older chips. The fact that this can go head to head in some tasks against the M3 Pro chip from last year, that is a very good thing, right? But now the next question dawns on you. Is that M4 chip powerful enough for me? Well, then I think we got to do a direct comparison against, what is after this chip. And that is, of course, a Mac Mini spec'd out with an M4 Pro chip. So let's say goodbye to the old Mac Mini. This is probably the last time you'll see it on this channel in any meaningful way. You've been around with us for a while with this design. I think it's been 14 years. So goodbye, sweet prince. But you're old news now. So much better. So yeah, M4 versus M4 Pro. What are the real differences here? Well, again, don't forget in single core CPU performance, these are going to be exactly the same. But in multi-core performance, there's actually a pretty big increase going to M4 Pro. You're going to see around a 44% increase in CPU performance. There is also something I want to point out about the differences between these Macs, and I alluded to this earlier. I did a Cinebench benchmark on both of these machines. Now, the reason why I tested Cinebench is because it's very intensive on these multi-threaded CPU workloads. And there was a surprising discovery. On the M4 Pro Mac Mini, I actually heard the fan spin up during this benchmark. But on the regular M4 version, because it is a lower powered chip, the fans did not spin up on this. So it was slower, but it was also quieter. And then in GPU performance, this is where things get even more drastic. You could see up to a 55% improvement in GPU performance stepping up to the M4 Pro chip. I think the best way to illustrate this is to look at a gaming benchmark for Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I did this on the highest settings on 1080p on both the M4 and the M4 Pro. And on the M4, you basically finished out that benchmark with an average of 40 frames per second. And on the M4 Pro, you finished out that same test with 80 frames per second. So it's getting double the frames per second. I think that's a pretty good indication that if you have a very graphics heavy workload, that's when you're gonna wanna step up to the M4 Pro. But I don't wanna discount what the M4 chip can do, at least in the area of gaming, when the game is properly optimized for the Mac. Apple has made strides with bringing some games over. Again, it's a very small library of games right now, but there's hope that gaming on the Mac could lead to something really good. And this $600 M4 Mac Mini gives me a lot of hope because I loaded up Resident Evil 4 Remake on this. Was not expecting it to run well, to be fair. Like I was loading this after seeing that benchmark going, ooh, this is gonna be a tough ask for this computer to run Resident Evil 4, right? But it did okay actually. So on 4K on the highest settings on the M4 Mac Mini, it didn't get 60 frames per second like I could on the M4 Pro version, but it did keep a stable 30 frames per second. For a game like that with high visual fidelity, running it at native 4K on a $600 computer, I actually chalk that up as a win. You can get really high resolution, 30 FPS. There's games that ship on PS5 with like those same gameplay specs. So I'm saying that's a win for the M4 Mac Mini. And even better, when you lower the resolution down to 1080p and still keeping it on the highest settings, well, you can actually get like locked 60 frames per second in Resident Evil 4 Remake on the base model Mac Mini. So despite the fact that you are getting a big GPU performance upgrade going from M4 Pro, if you're a gamer and you play optimized games on the Mac Mini, you can do it. Like if you're playing Resident Evil 4 Remake or Death Stranding or any of these games that Apple's optimizing for the Apple Silicon Mac, they're bringing out Cyberpunk next year apparently for this as well. Like they run on this base Mac Mini and they run pretty well, all things considered. So that's actually an area where I was surprised with the performance of the base model. So listen, I think we see our direct comparison against the M4 Pro. Obviously you're spending more money here. This is, more than double the price of this M4 model. Of course, you're gonna get better CPU performance and better GPU performance, but I think the thing I'm trying to illustrate here is that for most people, this M4 chip actually does really well. It is gonna obviously serve you just fine in CPU performance, and even with that GPU, if you're doing some like gaming and stuff like that, as long as it's on like an optimized title, this is gonna be pretty good. Now, if you're doing a lot of like intensive GPU workloads, obviously you're gonna wanna step up to the M4 Pro. I feel like, if you're doing like 3D design or modeling or something like that, or rendering out like a lot of things, like, yeah, you'll probably want M4 Pro performance. But if all you can afford is this base model M4 Mac, you're getting a lot of value right here in terms of performance. And that's why people are raving about this $600 computer. It is really good. And I think the most impactful thing about this upgrade for the M4 generation is that double the memory. I was doing a Final Cut export in this, and it exported the video in about like 4 minutes and 30 seconds, right? Like that's pretty fast. But the thing I noticed is I opened up Activity Monitor, and just exporting a Final Cut video, we were using about like 9 to 10 gigabytes of memory. So you can imagine if this was still coming with 8 gigabytes, that would already be constrained. But now you have breathing room on this machine. But the one weakness of this machine, the thing that still disappoints me out of everything, is still the starting storage. 256 gigabytes, it's really low. I just basically loaded up that Mac, had the default apps on it. I installed a few benchmarks, Final Cut Pro, and 2 games on it, and I was left with just 40 gigabytes of storage after all that. So there's not that much room to grow on the internal storage, but you do have options here because it is a desktop Mac. The first option, obviously, is you can spend like $200 more to get a 512 gigabyte drive. I think I'd probably make that recommendation to a lot of people, even if you're gonna use external storage, because I feel like having just a little bit more room on the internal drive to download apps is a good thing. But again, it's a desktop, so you have the option if you want to get like an external drive. Like I have this one from SanDisk. This is actually a 4 terabyte Thunderbolt 4 drive, and this actually gets the same or slightly better read and write speeds than the internal drive on this Mac Mini. And it's a 4 terabyte version for like, I think it was like $400. So you can already see that's a lot cheaper than the upgrades that Apple charges to upgrade to like even 2 terabytes on this Mac Mini. You have options there with the storage, but again, I would love to see Apple increase the internal storage on this, because other than that, this thing is such a killer value for anyone that wants a computer to do basic tasks or go beyond that. So M4 Mac Mini, a great value, but if you need more, the M4 Pro Mac Mini does exist. That's the video, right? So hopefully you found it helpful. If you did, please give me a like. If you want to see more, make sure you're subscribed. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.